The Millbrook Valley diner had not changed in 30 years. The same cracked vinyl booths ran along the south wall, patched in 3 places with mismatched tape that had long since yellowed. The same rotating pie display sat on the counter, half its shelves empty by 2 in the afternoon. The same bell above the door announced every arrival with a tinny, indifferent chime that nobody ever looked up for anymore. Marcus Hale looked up every time. He had been sitting in the corner booth for 40 minutes, long enough for his coffee to go cold, long enough to watch the lunch crowd thin out, long enough to count the exits twice without appearing to. It was a habit he had never managed to shake, the kind that lived in the muscles rather than the mind. 2 exits, 1 kitchen pass-through, 4 windows, 2 of which could open. The man by the register had a slight limp favoring his left side. The teenager mopping near the bathrooms kept his earbuds in and his eyes down. Neither was a threat. Neither was interesting. He was not there for the coffee. Marcus was 38 years old and looked like a man who had been somewhere difficult and returned without all of himself. Not in any visible way, no obvious scars, no tremor in the hands. He was broad-shouldered and unhurried, with dark eyes that moved slowly and missed nothing. He wore a plain gray shirt, dark jeans, worn boots. His hair was cut close. He looked like a man who had decided some time ago that he would never again own anything he couldn't carry. He had been back in Millbrook Valley for 11 days. He had not planned to stay more than 3. The bell above the door chimed. He glanced up, not quickly, not nervously, just the way he always did, and saw an elderly woman step inside. She moved carefully, the way people do when they have learned through experience that the floor cannot always be trusted. She was small, somewhere past 80, wearing a pale blue coat that was slightly too large for her and carrying a handbag pressed tight against her side as though it contained something she could not afford to lose. Her white hair was pinned neatly, and her face, though deeply lined, held a quality of alertness that most people her age had long surrendered. She stood at the entrance for a moment, eyes scanning the room. Not the wandering, uncertain scan of someone looking for a familiar face. Something more deliberate than that. Something almost tactical. Her eyes found Marcus. She did not look away. He returned her gaze steadily, the way he returned most things, without aggression, without invitation. He assumed she had mistaken him for someone else. It happened. He had one of those faces that people projected onto. But she walked toward him. She moved with careful purpose, navigating the gap between 2 tables, excusing herself quietly past a waitress carrying a tray. When she reached his booth, she did not ask if the seat was taken. She set her handbag on the table, placed both hands flat on the surface, and leaned slightly forward. Her eyes, he noticed, were gray and extremely clear. She spoke in a voice just above a whisper, clipped and deliberate, the way someone speaks when they are certain they are being listened to by the wrong people. "I need you to pretend you are my grandson," she said, "just for the next few minutes. It is very important that you do this, and I will explain everything. But right now, I need you to smile at me like you know me." Marcus did not move. Outside, a dark blue sedan he had not noticed before was parked along the curb with its engine still running. The driver had not come inside. He smiled at her like he knew her. Her name, she told him, was Eleanor Voss. She said it quietly, only after she had settled into the seat across from him, only after she had glanced once toward the window and then deliberately away from it. As though looking too long would confirm something she wasn't ready to confirm. She folded her hands on the table and held them still with the kind of effort that reveals itself only to people trained to notice such things. Marcus noticed. "You can call me Ellie," she added. "Everyone did, a long time ago." He said nothing. He had learned that silence, applied correctly, was the most efficient tool in almost any conversation. People filled it. They always filled it. And what they chose to fill it with told you more than any question could. Ellie studied him for a moment. She seemed to be making a calculation. "You're not going to ask me why," she said. "Not yet," he said. Something shifted in her expression, not relief exactly, but a recognition. The look of a person who has spent a long time being underestimated and has just encountered, unexpectedly, someone who might not do that. She unclasped her handbag and removed a single photograph. She placed it on the table between them, face up, and smoothed it once with 2 fingers as though it were something fragile. It was a picture of a younger woman, perhaps 50, standing outside what appeared to be a municipal building, arms crossed, squinting against bright sun, ordinary in every visible way. "That is my daughter," Ellie said. "Her name is Carol." Marcus looked at the photograph, then at Ellie. "She went to a meeting 3 days ago," Ellie continued. "A routine meeting, she told me, with a man from the county assessor's office about the property taxes on my house. I haven't heard from her since." She said it the way people say things they have rehearsed many times in the dark, trying to make them sound manageable. The words were steady. Her hands underneath the table now were not. "Have you called the police?" Marcus asked. "Yes," she paused. "They were very polite. They took a report. They told me adults go missing voluntarily every day and that Carol was probably fine and that I should wait." She looked at him directly. "I've been waiting for 3 days, Mr. Hale," he said. "Mr. Hale," she held his name for a moment. "I've been waiting for 3 days and Carol has not come home, and this morning I found a folded piece of paper slipped under my front door. No envelope, no name, just a note." She reached into her handbag again and removed a small folded square of paper, which she placed beside the photograph without unfolding it. "It says that if I involve anyone further, I will not see her again." The diner moved around them in its ordinary rhythms. The waitress refilled someone's coffee 2 booths down. The teenager finished mopping and started on a new section. The pie display rotated. "Why me?" Marcus asked. Ellie looked at the window again, brief, controlled, then back. "Because I have been watching you come in here every morning for 9 days, she said. "And I have watched how you sit, how you watch the door, how you never put your back to the room." She tilted her head slightly. "My late husband was an army man, Mr. Hale. 31 years. I know how soldiers carry themselves. I know the difference between a man who learned to be careful and a man who cannot stop being careful even when he tries." She tapped the folded note once, lightly, with one finger. "I cannot go to the police again. I cannot ask my neighbors. Whoever sent this note is watching my house, I'm certain of it. I have no one left who is capable." She paused. "But you walked in here this morning, and the man in the blue coat who has been following me for 2 days walked in 30 seconds behind you, and he sat 2 tables away, and he has been reading the same page of the same newspaper for 40 minutes. Marcus did not look toward the man in the blue coat. He picked up his cold coffee and took a slow sip, using the motion to angle himself fractionally, bringing the periphery of his vision in range. Gray coat, not blue, but the man was there. 50s, thick through the chest, holding a newspaper that hadn't turned a page since Marcus had been paying attention. He set the cup down. "Ellie," he said, keeping his voice the same temperature as everything else he'd said. "Is there a back way out of this diner?" She looked at him steadily. "Through the kitchen," she said. "Past the pie refrigerator. Door opens to the alley." He nodded once, slowly, and leaned back in his seat with the practiced ease of a man who was not, in any observable way, preparing to move very quickly. "Tell me about the property," he said, "the one Carol went to discuss." The Voss property had been in Eleanor's family for 61 years. Her husband, a man named Thomas Voss, who had died of a stroke 8 years prior, had purchased it young, before Millbrook Valley was the kind of place people purchased things. Back then it was farmland, mostly, and the valley's population was small and its ambitions smaller. Thomas had bought 11 acres on the eastern edge of town for almost nothing and built a modest house on 3 of those acres, leaving the remaining 8 as pasture and tree line, intending eventually to do something with them that he never quite got around to. Eleanor had not thought much about those 8 acres in years. Carol, she explained, had been managing the property taxes since Thomas died, a task she handled quietly, efficiently, without discussion. 3 weeks ago, Carol had mentioned, only once, in passing, over dinner, that someone from the county office had been in contact about a discrepancy in the property records, a reassessment, something that needed to be clarified in person. Carol had said it was nothing to worry about and had gone to the meeting, and that was the last time Eleanor had seen her daughter sit across from her at a dinner table. Marcus listened to all of this without interrupting. He was watching Ellie's hands, which she had folded again on the table, the deliberate stillness of a person managing grief through structure. He was watching her eyes, which were clear and dry in the way of people who have already done their crying alone and are now past the point where tears feel useful. And he was watching, in his peripheral vision, the man 2 tables away who had still not turned the page. "What's on those 8 acres?" Marcus asked. Ellie blinked. "Nothing. Trees. Some old fence line." "Has anyone approached you about selling?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, and he caught it, the slight pause, the almost invisible recalibration of someone realizing a connection they had not previously made. She said, 2 years ago, a development company. They sent a letter and then a representative. I said no. Thomas built on that land. I wasn't interested." "Do you still have the letter?" "I keep everything," she said. It was not said with pride. It was said as a simple fact. The way people state things that have always been true about themselves. "Good." Marcus set both hands flat on the table, mirroring her posture without intending to. "I need you to do something for me now. I need you to smile, not because anything is funny, but because we are having a pleasant conversation, and the man 2 tables to my left needs to believe that." He paused. "And then I need you to tell me, without looking at him, everything you can remember about the man who came to your door last week, the one from the county office." Ellie held his gaze for a long, measuring moment. Then she smiled. It was a remarkably convincing smile, the practiced warmth of a woman who had spent decades producing the correct expression at the correct time. "He was tall," she said, still smiling. "Younger than he dressed. He had a county ID badge that he showed me very quickly, too quickly at the door. He wore a wedding ring on the wrong hand." She paused. "And when I said Carol wasn't home and asked if he'd like to leave a card, he said he didn't have any with him." The smile held. "People from county offices always have cards, Mr. Hale." Marcus looked at her. In 12 years of service across 3 continents, through operations that existed in no official record, he had worked with analysts, operatives, assets, and informants. He had worked with people whose entire professional value was in the quality of their observation. Eleanor Voss, he thought, would have been exceptional. "When I stand up," he said quietly, "I'm going to hug you, because I'm your grandson and I have to leave. I need you to tell me, while we hug, the name of that development company. Then I need you to walk, not hurry, walk, to the kitchen, tell whoever's back there that you feel unwell and need some air, and go out through the alley. There's a blue pickup truck parked at the far end. It's unlocked. Get in and stay down." Ellie did not ask how he knew about the truck. She did not ask whose it was. She simply held his eyes and gave a very small nod, the kind that contains a great deal. "The company's name," she said, still smiling, still perfectly composed. "Talk was Redline Development Group." Marcus nodded once. Then he stood, and she stood, and he put his arms around her with the easy, unhurried warmth of a young man who had driven some distance to have lunch with his grandmother and was now heading back to wherever young men go. She was smaller than she had looked sitting down. She gripped his arm once, briefly, with surprising strength. Then she pulled back, patted his cheek once as though this were completely ordinary, picked up her handbag, and walked toward the counter to ask about something, and then, naturally, toward the back. Marcus left a 20 on the table. He walked to the register, paid for his coffee, exchanged a few words with the woman at the till about the weather. He did not look at the man 2 tables over. He did not need to. He could feel the weight of the man's attention the way you feel a change in air pressure. Not dramatically, just as a fact of the environment. He pushed through the front door. The bell chimed. Outside, the afternoon had turned gray, the sky pressing low over Millbrook Valley the way it did in autumn. The trees along Main Street reduced to dark lines against pale cloud. The blue sedan was still at the curb, still running. The driver was looking at his phone, or appeared to be. Marcus walked to his car, got in, and pulled onto the street in the direction away from the alley. He drove for 2 blocks, turned left, doubled back through a residential street that ran parallel to the alley, pulled to the curb. He took out his phone and made a call. It rang twice. "I told you I was retired," said the voice on the other end. "You say that every time," Marcus said, a pause, the sound of something being set down. "What do you need?" "Everything there is on a company called Redline Development Group, and whatever's in the county property records for 11 acres registered to a Thomas or Eleanor Voss in Millbrook Valley." "That's not nothing." "No," Marcus said, "it's not." Another pause, longer this time. "Give me 2 hours." Marcus ended the call. He sat for a moment, watching the mouth of the alley in his rearview mirror. After a short while, he saw Ellie emerge, moving carefully but with purpose, her pale blue coat a soft smear of color in the gray afternoon. She found the truck without hesitation. The door opened. She got in. He waited. The blue sedan did not appear at the alley entrance. He gave it another 90 seconds. Then he put the car in drive and went to collect her. The blue pickup belonged to a man named Danny Ruiz, who owed Marcus a favor of the kind that doesn't expire. Danny was in Tucson and wouldn't need the truck back for 2 weeks. Marcus had used it for nothing more interesting than grocery runs for the better part of a month, and it occurred to him now, pulling up alongside it on the quiet residential street, that this was probably the most sensible it had ever been deployed. Ellie was sitting upright in the passenger seat, not crouched, not trembling, sitting upright with her handbag on her lap, watching the street with those clear gray eyes. He pulled alongside and lowered his window. "Get in," he said. She transferred to his car with a dignity that the situation did not require but that she produced anyway, settling into the passenger seat and fastening her belt without being asked. The man in the gray coat," she said before he could speak. "He left the diner 30 seconds after you did. He went to the sedan. They drove away." Marcus looked at her. They didn't follow me, she added. They went the other way. He processed this as he pulled back onto the street. They went the other way meant one of two things. Either they had lost interest, unlikely, given the sustained surveillance, or they already knew where they were going and didn't need to follow anyone to get there. Your house, he said. Does anyone else have a key? Ellie was quiet for precisely 2 seconds. Carol has a spare. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. He drove to the eastern edge of town, away from the Voss property, saw and pulled into the parking lot of a hardware store that had closed 3 years ago and whose lot was empty and clearly visible from 3 directions. He parked where he could see the entrance. Then he sat and thought. Redline Development Group. He had never heard of them, which meant nothing by itself. Development companies materialized and dissolved constantly, especially the kind that operated at the edges of county zoning and land acquisition, the kind that sent people with badges they showed too quickly, the kind that identified elderly widows whose adult children managed their paperwork, because adult children were leverage, because leverage was the oldest mechanism in any operation involving real estate that someone wanted and someone else refused to give. This was not sophisticated. That was what bothered him. Whoever had taken Carol Voss had not taken her because they were subtle. They had taken her because they were impatient, and impatience was almost always more dangerous than sophistication. Impatient people escalated. Impatient people made decisions that couldn't be walked back. Mr. Hale, Ellie said. He looked at her. She's still alive. It was not a question. It was the kind of statement that has a request folded inside it, the way the note had been folded inside an envelopeless square. Small, tight, waiting. He looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said, and then, because she deserved the truth, and he could see that she was strong enough to hold it. For now, she's still useful to them. That's protection, but it's not permanent protection. He paused. I need to know about the assessor, the real one. Is there someone at the county office you've dealt with before? Someone you trust? Ellie thought. Margaret Hale, she said, then stopped. No relation, I assume? None. She processed Thomas's estate taxes when he died. She was kind about it. She called twice to check whether I had questions. Call her, Marcus said, not from your cell phone. He reached into the center console and produced a prepaid phone, still in its packaging, another item whose mundane availability had suddenly become relevant. Ask her to look up whether there was any county assessor contact with your property in the last 6 weeks. Don't tell her why. Just tell her you're confused about a letter. Ellie took the phone. She looked at it for a moment with the expression of someone who had lived long enough to find themselves doing things they had never imagined doing. How long have you been back? She asked, not looking up from the phone. 11 days? And what were you planning to do? He was quiet for a moment. Nothing, he said. I was planning to do nothing. She nodded slowly, as though that answered more than he'd intended. She opened the packaging with neat, efficient fingers and dialed from memory. Margaret Hale, no relation, called back on the prepaid phone 40 minutes later. Marcus had parked by then in a different location, a quiet side street 2 blocks from the library, where a large oak had dropped enough leaves to half obscure the car from the road. Ellie had barely moved in the interim. She had sat with her hands folded and her eyes on the middle distance with the specific stillness of someone doing arithmetic, the kind where the numbers are days and risks and chances, and the math never comes out clean. The call lasted 4 minutes. Marcus listened to Ellie's half of it. The careful questions, the measured tone, the small social lubricant she applied expertly to keep the conversation from becoming alarming. When she hung up, she turned to him and delivered what she had learned with a precision that would have served her well in a great many other careers. There had been no county assessor contact with the Voss property in the last 2 years. No correspondence, no scheduled meetings, no record of any representative dispatched to Millbrook Valley in connection with any Voss account. The man who had come to the door had never worked for the county. The meeting Carol Voss had attended had never been a meeting. She walked into it herself, Ellie said quietly, not with bitterness, with the particular anguish of understanding exactly how something happened and being unable to unknow it. She was trying to protect you, Marcus said. She didn't want you to worry. Ellie closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were the same, clear, composed, relentlessly present. His phone buzzed, a text from the contact he'd called earlier, a former intelligence analyst named Chen who had left government work to do something she described as consulting, and Marcus had never asked her to elaborate on. The text contained a link and 3 words. This is large. He opened the link. It was a compressed file of documents, county records, corporate filings, a surveying report, and something he had not expected. a geological assessment commissioned privately 18 months ago for a parcel of land in Millbrook Valley's eastern district, covering approximately 9 acres. The assessment was marked proprietary, it was detailed, and buried in its third section, in the dry language of industrial geology, was a notation about a subsurface mineral deposit of a type that had become, in the last 4 years, extraordinarily valuable. The kind of valuable that did not stay quiet. The kind of valuable that reached people who paid other people to make problems disappear efficiently, which often meant making people disappear first. 8 acres of old pasture and tree line. 61 years in a family that had never thought to look beneath it. Marcus read the report twice. Then he set the phone face down on the console and was still for a long time. "What is it?" Ellie asked. He thought about how to say it. Then he thought that she had already survived more than most people would have, and that she was still here, clear-eyed and capable, and that she deserved to know what she was sitting inside of. He told her. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Thomas used to say that land holds its secrets until the right person comes asking," she said. "I thought it was something he read somewhere." It might have been. She looked out the window at the oak tree, the scattered leaves, the ordinary street. "Where is she, Mr. Hale?" The question was soft. It was the softest thing she had said since she sat down across from him in the vinyl booth, and that made it the most difficult to hear. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I know who does." He picked up his phone and called Chen again. "The sedan," he said when she answered. "Blue, late model, Millbrook Valley. I need owner registration and any associated addresses. Oh, and I need to know if Redline Development Group has a local office or a local contact, anyone they use on the ground." "How fast?" Chen said. "Now," Marcus said, a pause, the quiet tap of keys. "Give me 20 minutes, she said. And Marcus. Another pause, different in quality from the first. "This company, Redline, there are some names attached to it that are going to complicate your week considerably." He looked at the oak tree, a single leaf detached and drifted down. "Complicate it how?" he said. Chen told him. He did not say anything for a moment. "I see," he said. Beside him, Ellie was watching his face with those gray eyes that missed nothing. She had spent 31 years watching a soldier's face and reading what it did not say. She was reading his now, and he knew it, and he let her, because she had a right to know that this was larger than a missing woman, and a piece of land, larger than one impatient development company, larger than a note slipped under a door. "Is she still alive?" Ellie asked. The same words as before, the same folded request. Marcus looked at her. "Yes," he said again, "but we're not waiting." He started the car. Outside, Millbrook Valley sat quiet under its gray autumn sky. The diner, the hardware store, the old streets and ordinary houses, the eastern edge of town where 11 acres of pasture and tree line held a secret that had already cost one woman her freedom and was preparing to cost considerably more. Somewhere in that quiet, Eleanor Voss was waiting. And somewhere in that quiet, the men who had taken her were waiting too, certain, in the way that impatient people are always briefly certain, that they had accounted for everything. They had not accounted for the man in the corner booth who always looked up when the bell rang. They had not accounted for the 80-year-old woman who noticed which hand a stranger wore his ring on. And they had not yet learned, though they were about to, that the most dangerous operations are never the ones that begin with violence. They begin with an old woman in a pale blue coat leaning across a diner table and asking a stranger to pretend, just for a few minutes, that he knows her. What happened in the hours after Marcus Hale started that car has never been formally documented. The official record shows only that Eleanor Voss was found safe 4 days later, that Redline Development Group ceased all activity in Millbrook Valley by the end of the week, and that the property assessor's office received an anonymous tip leading to the suspension of 2 individuals whose employment history contained several unusual gaps. No charges were filed against Marcus Hale. His name appears nowhere in the paperwork. What Ellie Voss told her daughter about the man who helped her, what she said when Carol asked who he was and how she'd found him, was never recorded either, but those who know Eleanor Voss say that she smiled when she answered, and that she said he was just someone who sat in the right seat. If you have enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe to our channel for more stories.